Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
So we now know that Mike Macdonald is not going to go undefeated as head coach of the Seattle Seahawks preseason and regular season. The game just ending in Nashville. The Seahawks go down to the Titans 16-15 today to even their preseason record at 1-1. Why was it 16-15? Jason Myers missed an extra point. The Seahawks scored their first touchdown. I'm Dan Viens. This is Seahawks Forever. You can follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Welcome to the show. Please hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notification of future episodes. And if you like what you hear and see and you want to support the show, all the different ways you can do that are down below in the description. I should be able to see your comments, your questions tonight, whether you're watching on Twitter or Twitch or YouTube. Send those in and I can get them in. Depending on which way you send them, I can put some of them on the screen as well. What'd you think? Well, I will sum up today's game in one word. Nah, I guess. There's some things to like. There's some things to be concerned about, and we will get to all those. First of all, let's set the stage, right? Neither team played many starters, if at all. In fact, most of the starters on the Seahawks sideline were in not street clothes, but no pads, jerseys, and Gilligan's Island hats. Just kind of a nice touch. And I think I didn't see this definitively stated, but, Mike Macdonald talked a lot about how much planning went into this week and the joint practices between the Titans and the Seahawks on Wednesday and Thursday, and how much planning and communication between Macdonald and Brian Callahan, first-year head coach in Tennessee, and their staffs on organizing this all. And it sounds like it was one of those things that was decided ahead of time on both teams' parts. That the starters were going to get so much quality action and so many good quality reps, ones against ones, in pads Wednesday and Thursday, that let's not play the starters in week 2, which a lot of teams don't anyway. Joint practices or not. If you haven't checked out the episode with Easton Freeze, he goes in depth. He's a reporter for the Titans and goes into depth about what he saw on the field during those practices. So we didn't get to see a lot of the starters today. In fact, on offense, really the only starter I would say is Anthony Bradford. Oluwatimi was out there. He's been running with the ones all preseason and training camp, but with the acquisition of Connor Williams, we expect him to be the starter as soon as he's ready to go. Bradford has been getting the run at first team right guard for most of the preseason. That battle seems to have heated up between he and third round pick Christian Haynes at right guard, but Haynes today playing left guard extensively in the first half because Laken Tomlinson, one of those veterans, getting the day off. So what I thought I would do is just kind of go through and give you 3 categories. Players that I thought stood out, really looked good tonight. And then players who flashed, who had moments, who kind of showed their upside and their ceiling. And then players who struggled. And we'll talk about some of the things that are concerning. First and foremost, if you can't tell by the thumbnail on YouTube, I thought, again, Sam Howell might have been the best player on offense for the Seahawks. And the thing that's most encouraging to me is it looked very, very much like what we saw week 1. Except he actually had a couple more opportunities to get the ball downfield today. 11 out of 14, and that includes a drop of a perfectly placed pass to Brady Russell that was originally ruled a catch and then reviewed and overturned. So 11 out of 14, 153 yards and a touchdown for Howell. Didn't come close to getting picked. He looked decisive, controlled, comfortable, and competent. And again, I'll say it. Those are the same things I said about him last week. For all the reporting of how he kind of struggled the first couple of weeks of training camp with his accuracy and decision-making and pulling the trigger and the massive gap between Geno and him. And granted, before some of you jump into the comments with, well, it was against twos, like, how else are we going to judge him? I thought he looked incredibly consistent with his performance today versus what we saw against the Chargers in week 1. To me, that's promising. He gets rid of the ball quickly. There were a couple of plays he took 2 sacks. On both of them, pressure was an issue. You can make a case on the second one that he could have gotten rid of the ball, thrown the ball away. But for the most part, seems to be getting rid of the ball very quickly. The arm talent that we saw all the way back at North Carolina, we saw at Washington, it's just so natural. It's really not. He flicks his arm and the ball's gone. His mechanics are good. And today we got to see a couple of darts down the middle of the field. Threw an absolute seed on a seam route to Cody White for a 25-yard gain where he had to split the defensive backs. Absolute thing of beauty as far as timing, anticipation goes, making the read, knowing he can make that throw. First 2 drives before we got to see those flashes, just no pass protection. And there was nothing to be had in the running game. 2 3-and-outs to start the game. Looked like it was going to be, oh no, one of those. Back-to-back 3-and-outs for -4 yards. But even during those 6 plays, I thought, I just don't see this guy get rattled. The book on Howell last year in Washington was at the halfway point, he was leading the NFL in yardage, and he was looking like he was on his way to a great season. But Eric Bieniemy just decided we're going to throw it 70% of the time, even though our offensive line is mediocre at best. And teams know that's what we're going to do. We're just not going to give them, we're going to lead the league or be near the top in early down pass rate. We're not going to disguise anything. We're just going to hang him out to dry, basically. By the second half of the season, that started to catch up to him. You would think that maybe there'd be some PTSD, right? Maybe there would be some aftershock there, some bad habits that had to be broken. And maybe that's what resulted in those uneven performances his first couple of weeks in camp. But in these games, and look, we've heard the term, some guys are gamers. Some guys just play better than they practice. But he's looked really good. He's looked as good as I think you can expect him to look. With all, you want to make excuses if you're not a believer in Sam Howell and you want to say, well, it was against the twos. You want him to go 14 out of 14? And then you still wouldn't be happy? He looks like a guy that if anything should happen to Geno Smith this season, would knocked on, can win you games. I actually would love to see, and maybe we'll see it for a minute in the 3rd preseason game. I'd have to go back and look and see how the Baltimore Ravens handled the 3rd preseason game. Some teams play their starters for a quarter. I would absolutely love to see Howell get a couple of drives with the ones. We may not see that. But based on what I've seen so far, I feel a lot better about our backup quarterback situation if anything should happen to Geno. And honestly, we can talk a bit about the bigger picture too. Like maybe Sam is a guy that stays around beyond the 2 years left on his contract and does some cool things. And then you want to talk about the touchdown throw to Aesop Winston Jr. Go Cougs. Absolute perfectly thrown ball. Decisive, went through his progression, decided that's where he was going with the ball, got rid of it, dropped it in a bucket. Man-to-man coverage in the corner, perfectly thrown. Nobody in the league could have thrown that ball better. That ball was perfectly thrown. He seems like a guy who just keeps his cool, has some fun out there, had some scrambles. That 3rd drive is a thing of beauty for the touchdown. 8 plays, 84 yards. He was 4 for 4 on that drive for 53 yards. And then followed that up with a 10-play, 78-yard field goal drive where they got in the red zone and had some trouble running the football. And then maybe the best part was the Seahawks get the ball back with 38 seconds left in the first half. And they go 43 yards in 6 plays. Perfect clock management. Howell completes a couple of balls to kick the field goal going into the half. Thought it was outstanding. Really thought it was an outstanding game by Sam Howell. Also, another guy who stood out to me in the first half was Kenny McIntosh. Now, this one is interesting. There's a big battle going on right now between McIntosh and George Holani for that third running back spot. And we have heard multiple times about how Holani may be in the lead for that spot because he's a far superior pass protector. And yet, McIntosh is the guy that seems to be out there first. When they had the joint practices with the Titans, there was one practice, one of the two, I can't remember if it was Wednesday or Thursday, where Holani looked like he may have gotten ahead of McIntosh because of his pecking order and who he was running with. But then when it was 2-minute drill time, it was McIntosh. And that's a big deal. He looked like the superior inside runner, decisive, cutting up the field, physical. He looked like, you want to see, and I've heard scouts say this before, when you see a player transition to the NFL, you want to see him do the things that he did in college. The things that you see on tape that make you want to draft him, you want to see them repeat those in the NFL. It sounds simplistic, but not everybody can do it. Bigger, stronger, faster, right? He looked like Kenny McIntosh at Georgia. But then Corbin Smith tweets later in the game, longtime friend of the show and myself, not impressed at all with Kenny McIntosh in pass protection, just really, really struggling in that aspect of the game. So that'll be a fascinating battle because I'm not sure they keep 3. I don't know if they can afford to. Especially given, some questions at the tight end position. We don't know about Pharaoh Brown's injury. Obviously, he didn't play or dress today. We haven't really heard much more about that since he was carted off the field in Nashville during the padded practices. Can they keep 4 running backs? Can they afford to keep 4 running backs? They have in the past. But this is a new regime, and they might be looking at things differently. There's the return game to consider. You might have to essentially add a roster spot or reserve a roster spot for somebody who's one of your return specialists. Fascinating. And it could come down to week 3. And then another one was Derek Hall. And this one makes me so happy. If you don't know Derek Hall's story, Google it. And then if you don't like him after that, I don't know what to tell you. I've had the pleasure of meeting him twice at my place of work, and he's the most polite and humble and gracious young man. Remembered me the second time, was very appreciative, and just, you want to root for this guy, right? The knock on him coming out of college was there weren't a lot of dynamic pass rush moves in his tool belt. His strength is strength. It's bull rush. It's single arm. We saw examples of him at Alabama doing it, or at Auburn doing it from both sides. I said Alabama because I was thinking about the Alabama tape, where he exhibited the ability to beat both their tackles with that single arm bull rush from either side. And both those tackles are now in the NFL. He was outstanding. Again, 3 tackles, 3 solo tackles, a sack, a quarterback hit, a tackle for loss. And he just seemed to be in on just about everything. And the impressive thing about it as well, and we'll touch on this in another light before we wrap up, he had to play the whole game. He's not the only one. He, Miles Adams, and Mike Morris essentially played the whole game. I'll confirm that when the snap counts come out. But depth up there is a concern, and that's something we're going to touch on. But given the opportunity, we'd heard from the beginning of camp, he looked like a different player, like he was ready to take a step forward, that he's a perfect fit, and that they know how to use him. And he has done it now in every public opportunity that we've had a chance to see. Did it against the Chargers. He showed up in the padded practices, did it again today. Really excited for what Derek Hall can do. And really, you can see now the hierarchy. Now, Boye Mafe played more snaps tonight than I was expecting him to. But I think that speaks to that depth issue. I don't think they wanted to play him if they could help it, because he's essentially a starter. We haven't seen Draymond Jones in training camp so far. So, technically, if he's going to play edge, then maybe Moffitt. But they're going to rotate. They're essentially co-starters. So if Jones is going to be out any longer, we don't know the situation there. He tweaked that hamstring in the padded practices. Derek Hall stepping up is a big deal. But you can see that he's leapfrogged former second-round pick Darrell Taylor. Taylor played most of the game, kind of on and off too. But it appeared from the reps he got that he is behind Derek Hall, which would make sense in the context of, given we know that Taylor has struggled against the run in his career. Now, players who flashed. I mentioned Mike Morris. He continues to show up, push the pile, be a physical presence. Similar player to Hall in the sense that, bull rush is his forte. He's just much taller, much longer, 6'5", 6'6", 280, 290. We don't know what he's playing at these days. He's kind of bounced between 280, 285, and 300. Another guy who had to play almost the entire game. We do see one thing that I thought was interesting tonight. I thought, even though, they're keeping things very vanilla, as we would expect, we're seeing a lot more crosses and stunts up front and twists. And we saw some of that today between Mafe, Hall, Morris. They do a lot of that stuff, McDonald and his staff, where they stand guys up in the middle of that defensive line. Another guy who flashed, since we're talking about the defensive line, I thought Miles Adams really held his own. He was a question mark going into this, his fourth season, I believe. He's always kind of been a fringe bubble roster guy who's had moments. He had to play almost the entire game. And the reason for that is, he's not a true nose tackle stylistically or physically, certainly. But they have to play him there. Because after Jonathan Hankins, who they're taking it easy on this preseason, as they should, veteran, 32 years old, I think. They don't have much there. They've signed 3 undrafted free agents off the street in the last 2 weeks to play that position after letting Matt Gotel go because of an injury. We don't know what's up with Cam Young, and we need to find that out. When training camp opened, Mike McDonald addressed 2 defensive line injuries, and I thought did it very directly and transparently in one of his first press conferences of training camp. And it was Jaron Reed and Cam Young. And he said, both those guys, it's not serious. They're not that far away. Reed's about a week away. Young's about 2 weeks away. Well, that was a month ago. Don't know what's going on with Cam Young, but the 4th round pick last year out of Mississippi State, this roster, this team needs him. We're going to talk later in the week about some positions they might be hunting at the cut down date. Obviously, nose tackle, interior defensive tackle is one of those. Looking for a guy who's been cut, a guy who's an upgrade. Cam Young needs to get on the field. And certainly this front office has to be scouring other rosters, looking for guys who can play that position. But I thought Adams held his own. He was active. He was moving around. He was around the ball a lot. Never going to be a full-time starter, but one of those guys, that this team anyway, needs on their roster, needs him to be able to contribute if some other guys don't step up. I thought the 2 Auburn cornerbacks, Nehemiah Pritchett, DJ James, flashed. Now, they had their rookie moments. There was one point where the play-by-play announcer even pointed out that DJ James had a couple of rough plays back-to-back, a couple of bad reps, but came back and made some plays. So did Pritchett. They made a play together late in the game where they broke up a pass. Thought it was cool to see those guys got extended action, obviously. We didn't see Devin Witherspoon or Reek Woolen. We saw a little bit of Trey Brown, which surprised me. In fact, even though he was in there for a minute, he got a lick on somebody, got a hard hit, as Trey will do. We saw a lot of Mike Jackson, and we saw a lot of Pritchett and James and D. Williams. I thought Tyrese Knight flashed again. Had a tackle for loss, was around the ball. Just looks like a guy, you can continue to use the word raw. That's cool. Maybe it's accurate. There were a lot of people that thought he was overdrafted in the 4th round, that he didn't deserve to go that high, that there were other guys that were preferable at that position, a position of need after losing Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks. He looks like a player. And he looks like a guy that can mold, and he looks like a guy that's going to be a contributor. 2 weeks in a row now, he's done some cool things, hitting guys. And that tackle for loss came on the final drive in a big moment. It was cool to see. I thought A.J. Barner flashed, and this was really timely considering what we've already talked about with Pharaoh Brown. Brown primarily signed in the offseason for his blocking acumen. John Schneider referred to him as one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. We saw that last week against the Chargers. He gets hurt against the Titans. We don't know the severity of it. We've heard it might be knee. Mike McDonald referred to it as a foot. We're not sure. No clarity on that yet. If he's out for any extended period of time, Barner hasn't exactly garnered a lot of attention or press with his performance in camp. Curtis Allen, who writes for the Seahawks draft blog with Rob Staten, he's been on the show, has gone to a lot of practices this training camp and said watching A.J. Barner run pass routes is like watching a guy in slow motion or quick stand. That wasn't encouraging. But the thing about Barner, first of all, keep in mind, youngest player at his position in the draft, just 21 years old. A lot of upside, a lot of development ahead of him. But it was his ability to be a two-way player. Maybe not a dynamic athlete, but sure-handed, contributes in the passing game, but an outstanding blocker. Saw that tonight over and over again. Saw several instances of Barner looking like an NFL veteran blocking tight end. Outstanding. Sprung some big runs from McIntosh. Really looked competent there. So knowing that if Brown is out for any length of time, that Barner can help you in that spot. You need a guy that can really help shut down the edge. And then some things late in the game, like Ty Okada got a lot of reps today. He and Kobe Bryant both, and Bryant flashed as well as he did week one. He just looks really comfortable at safety. I think that's his spot now long-term, and I think he might be part of this thing a year or two from now as some of these safeties get a little bit older. But Okada showing some of the things he did last year as an undrafted rookie out of Montana State, just flying around, always around the ball, and then late in the game when the game was still in the balance, had an interception off a tipped ball. He just had his name called a lot tonight. It's hard not to put him on this list. 3.5 minutes left in the game. He had that interception. And then players who really struggled. For me, it was the two tackles who started tonight. McClendon Curtis again, and Stone Forsythe. I know I was hard on Curtis last week because of his footwork, compared to Jermaine Ifedi, that the slide step, footwork needed a lot of work, that he tended to backpedal when he panicked. The footwork looks better tonight. It just looked like he's not capable of keeping up with edge players, and then he does belong inside. And so if there's anything that tops the list of things we need to hear this coming week as we head into the third preseason game and beyond, it's, can we get some clarification that George Fant is completely healthy and that you're just being careful with him, keeping him in bubble wrap, treating him with kid gloves? Because the third option, if Curtis has to be the guy, is not great. And then we need some clarity on Abe Lucas. We got to find something out. That may also be a position where the Seahawks are looking long and hard at the cut to 53 for someone they feel like might be an upgrade. Because if we get into a position where McClendon Curtis has to be your starting right tackle at any point this year, guys, that might be tough. That might be tough. Forsythe, I'm not that worried about. I'm disappointed, but I'm not worried because he's been so bad at times that I think he's replaceable. Fant can play left tackle too if Lucas ever does come back. Raekwon O'Neal can play some left tackle. Garrett Greenfield played left tackle late in the game. I don't know that those guys could be all that much worse than Forsyth. And the reason I say I'm disappointed is because when you go back to when he was drafted in the 6th round out of Florida, and you read scouting reports and his draft profiles at that time, they were very consistent. Several different reports stating that needs some work as a run blocker, kind of came out of that air raid sort of run and gun offense wide open in Florida, but could start as a pass protector in the league today. More than one scout said that. But that's where he struggles, man. I mean, he just gets abused. The one sack, the one really bad sack of Howell. I mean, Forsyth just got physically dominated by a backup player. You heard Easton Freeze say that as good as the Titans might be up front on their first line, Jeffrey Simmons and the rookie Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy's ex-teammate at Texas, that their depth is not great. And yet, Jalen Harrell out of Michigan, rookie, played for Mike McDonald for a year over there, had 2 sacks, I think, tonight. He's the guy that just ran over Forsyth. And they had some other guys that were on that second team that just kind of had their way with tackles. I actually thought the interior guys held up pretty well. Oluwatimi starting at center, at least until Connor Williams is ready to go. And then Anthony Bradford holding down his spot at right guard. And then they had Christian Haynes at left guard. And, those first 2 drives were rough, but then they put together the 2 long drives, the 2 80-ish yarders that resulted in 10 points. And they were able to run the football and give Sam Howell enough time to throw. So I thought those guys, there was one play, Anthony Bradford, I'm going to have to dig a little deeper into. I told you I might do a film breakdown last week. Didn't have time to. Also said on the reaction show last week that I was really impressed with him at first viewing. Went back and watched the All-22. He had some rougher moments than I remember. But today he was mostly good too, watching it live. There was one play in particular, one fairly good size run. I don't remember the exact yardage, from Kenny McIntosh over the right side, where Anthony Bradford took care of 2 dudes. Like, not at once. You see that sometimes, right? Guys are coming, they shoot the same gap or whatever, and you kind of shield them both off. No, he blew one guy out of the hole and then moved to the next guy and eliminated him too. There may be some athletic limitations in pass protection, but Anthony Bradford can move some dudes in the run game, and he did it again tonight. Ultimately, came down to the Titans coming back and eking this one out. MVP of the game was Braden Averson, rookie, undrafted free agent place kicker out of North Carolina State. With 8 minutes left, had a 58-yard field goal to give the Titans a 13-12 lead. And then with 3 seconds left, hit a 50-yarder or a 47-yarder to ice it. Keep in mind, though, that if you're one of those who is concerned about wins and losses in the preseason, it's always better to win. It's always fun to win. Malik Willis started this game at quarterback for the Titans and kind of showed all aspects of what we have come to know Malik Willis as, based on his college career at Liberty and then his scouting report and some of the moments that he's had to play so far. Couple of good throws, couple of scrambles, couple of bad throws, bad decisions. Had multiple balls almost picked, and was lucky to get out of there without having 2 or 3 picks. Nehemiah Pritchett had his hands on a ball that he slipped on the turf, or he probably would have picked. Kobe Bryant almost picked a ball. Mason Rudolph played the second half, and Mason Rudolph is not your typical preseason week 2, 3rd and 4th quarter quarterback. Started 13 games in the NFL, beat the Seahawks last year for Pittsburgh, right? Late in the season, played really well for them when he took over down the stretch for the Steelers last year. Was a clear upgrade over Kenny Pickett, obviously. Earned himself a decent contract to be the backup in Tennessee to Will Levis. Very capable player. 64% career passing completion percentage guy, and showed that, So keep that in mind if that's something that's important to you. But the other good news today is, to my knowledge, no injuries. Knock on wood. No injuries. Seahawks should be pretty darn healthy heading into week 3 against the Cleveland Browns at home, by the way. All right, let's see what we got here. Hey, hello to, let's just say hi to Jonas McGee from Norway. It's so cool to know that the reach goes that far. He goes on to make a couple other comments that I won't put on the screen. So anyway, he got his moment of fame. But let's go over to YouTube and see what you guys are saying over there. Hi, guys. I'd rather be flying. Thanks for the donation. Really appreciate the super thanks. Don't really care about wins and losses in the preseason. Getting live reps for new players, coaches is the real prize. A win is a bonus, but otherwise, meh. Well said. Misfit 74, any clarity on left and right guard after today? I still believe that Laken Tomlinson is the guy at left guard. I really believe they're committed to it. I think that's why he didn't dress today. And I think it's justified. I saw enough things against the Chargers. He's a veteran. He's a pro. He just looks like a guy that knows where he's supposed to go, what he's supposed to do. We saw him get ragdolled by Justin Simmons in one-on-ones against the Titans, but one-on-ones never really set the offensive lineman up for success when you don't have any help on either side. And Justin Simmons is that guy. So I think Tomlinson's going to be the left guard. And I think Bradford's going to start week 1. I thought he was good enough today. Again, I'll watch it again on 11 or on all 22. I don't think Christian Haynes has overtaken him. I see a lot to like from Haynes. I think he's going to be a long-term starter, but maybe Bradford ends up seizing that right guard spot this season and Haynes moves to left guard next year in place of Tomlinson. I don't know. That doesn't sound like clarity, does it? If I answer your question, but I think week 1 you're talking about during, against the Denver Broncos, Tomlinson at left guard, Bradford at right guard, I think is the way it goes. And hope to heck Connor Williams is ready to go at center. I'm not all that worried against the Broncos and the Patriots weeks 1 and 2. If Olu has to play, I think he'll be solid. He's not a liability. He just doesn't have the upside and the ceiling of a Connor Williams. And then we got to find out about Abe. Vince W, will we see any kicker competition come in? Absolutely not. Like, he missed the extra point. He's solid. I know he's making money. I think this is a conversation to be had this offseason. You could save $4 or $5 million, and maybe it's time to go a different direction, save a few pennies there. But I think, especially with the kickoff thing and, Myers' accuracy there, and how the importance they're placing on that until they figure out how to manage it, I don't see that happening. Anyone you're going to have come in and compete with him now is someone who's failed and probably failed multiple times. Defense much better in the first half than the second. Gave up a lot of yards in the second. They did, Josh. But again, because of the Seahawks' lack of depth there on the defensive line, I don't think they would normally, in an ideal situation, want to play Mike Morris, Derek Hall, Miles Adams the entire game like they did. They wouldn't. They wouldn't do that in a real game, even if they were the 3 starters on the team. They would rotate those guys. So I do think there was a little bit of that where maybe up front they got a little bit fatigued. Tyson Stanger says PJ Walker needs to be swapped for someone. If you're going to swap your 3rd string quarterback for someone, he's going to be someone just like PJ Walker. Minnesota Vikings just signed Matt Corral today as their 3rd quarterback because, they had to put JJ McCarthy on the injury list, or actually he's their 4th quarterback. Like, guys like that are who are available. You're not going to find much of an upgrade. Walker will do some decent things for you. Hopefully he'll never have to play. But that's about, if you get rid of the PJ Walker, you're going to replace him with a PJ Walker, if that makes sense. Let's see. Johnny Lugo says we need a new kicker. All of this don't matter. Won't be on the team by week 1. I don't see how you can think that. He made all his field goals tonight, missed the extra point. Happens. It happens. It's a preseason game. It's not a big deal. I think Jason Myers has proven himself to be a consistent kicker. Brendan Meyer says game balls for Sam Howell. Sam Howell and Derek Hall. I agree. I think those guys probably on each side of the ball were the best players on that side of the ball. Didn't see much Byron Murphy tonight, by the way, if you're wondering why I'm not talking about him. He got some reps early. And God, there was one play in particular where he looked like the Byron Murphy that you're used to at Texas, where he takes on a double team and just pushes the pile, doesn't give up on the play, doesn't end up making the tackle, but pushes the pile in the direction of the ball carrier, ends up, being no gain. And, didn't have any dynamic snaps really, but I think they just wanted to give him a taste, and he was out of there by halftime. See, again, guys, Andy FN says PJ sucks and our third and fourth strings are bad. You know what fourth stringers in the NFL are? Unemployed. They're not going to be on any roster. When you get to the fourth string in preseason, those are guys that are not going to make the roster. And, some of those third string guys are. It's not like the Titans dominated us in the second half, right? Game ended 16-15. Clave says Knight's a baller, like what he did out there. I agree. I think there's potential there. I think what we'll probably see is they'll find a role for him this year that works. But hopefully he doesn't have to be a full-time player. Now, that's another answer we need to get this week. So we need to find out about Jerome Baker. We haven't seen him. None of us have seen him. He's been a mystery. He was out all offseason. Then he comes off the PUP list and he's ready to go for practice. And then before we can see a public scrimmage at Lumen Field or a game of any kind, he gets hurt again. We'll have to see. Marquise Blair played well. I like him, Andy says. I had him in my notes and guess I didn't mention him. He flashed late, right? Did what Marquise Blair did 4 years ago when we drafted him. It's kind of amazing to see. He was essentially out of football last year. He really didn't play at all. But he looks quick to react to the ball, instinctive. He's hitting guys. Had a tackle for loss on that last drive. Like, he's not going to make this roster because the Seahawks are solid at safety. But I sure hope they keep him on the practice squad because I think he's a guy that can resurrect his career. And when they signed him, I thought he was just camp depth. I didn't think there was any chance that he'd make this roster. And I still don't, but I think he's going to be a practice squad guy. Vince W says I'd put Darrell Taylor for disappointing. Didn't flash. I know he's been hurt, but it seems like he doesn't have enough play strength. He was in the vicinity on a couple of plays in the backfield, but I'm with you. Like, what I liked about Taylor coming out of Tennessee was he was a guy that in that class had about as good a bend around the edge as anybody. I don't even see that anymore. Maybe that's the broken leg and it just never came back here, right? The confidence to really be able to lean on that and do that 45-degree angle bend thing, because that's what he would do at Tennessee. It was pretty dynamic. He's just a guy, and I wish Jones was healthy, because if Draymond Jones was healthy and we knew we could count on him, I think Taylor's a guy that maybe you flip him before the cut and get a late round pick from someone who needs some depth there. But none of the other young guys have flashed in camp. I really like the signing of Nelson Caesar out of Houston and undrafted free agency. He hasn't done a thing. Had a conversation with Mike Thompson today of 12th Man Rising, old friend of the show. We text all the time. What about Hassan Reddick? I immediately dismissed it because I think he wants a big contract. His cap hit this year is only $750,000. I don't know. I don't know if you could trade for him and convince him the situation's better and will help him make money. If you have to give him a big deal, it's probably not an option. But maybe the bridge is burned in New York. He just wants out of there and he'll play for someone else. Seahawks might be looking for one more edge guy, too. Let's see. Misfit 74 says they're keeping 3 running backs. here's what I think. And I'm going to do a 53-man roster prediction later this week. And I'll just kind of tell you ahead of time, one of my criteria going into it is I'm going to try to predict the initial 53. And sometimes that isn't the 53-man roster that you have week 2, because there's the issue of vested veterans. And if you place a vested veteran on the roster on the initial 53, you have to guarantee his base salary for the entire year. So maybe sometimes there's some roster manipulation that needs to happen. The other part of that is, who can we get to the practice squad? If the Seahawks really like George Holani and they think they'll have no problem getting him to the practice squad, then maybe that's the move. But if they think, and John Schneider's as good as anyone in the league at knowing what's going on around the league, and he has friends, and they tell him things, and he puts his ear to the ground, right? If they think, actually, Kenny McIntosh is probably less likely to be waived because everyone else is concerned about his inability to pass protect just like we are, then maybe they keep Holani instead of McIntosh. So just remember that the initial 53 isn't always the 53, right? Let me see just if you guys have anything else. Otherwise, I think that's it, you guys. Thanks for tuning in. You can follow me always on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Let's get some tunage going here. Hang on. I have a tradition to uphold. I will do the 53-man prediction show later in the week and get you ready for the last preseason game. I will be attending the last preseason game in person. So the reaction show next week probably won't happen until Sunday, because it's a 7:00 kickoff Pacific time. Game gets over 10. Got to get home, put notes together. You're all going to be asleep by the time I would do a live reaction show. So next week, the reaction to the Browns will happen on Sunday. Until then, all the different ways to support the show are down below. Look at past shows. If you're looking for some content this week, I'm going to take a day off, rest, refresh, and get back at it on Monday. Thank you again, you guys, for all the support. The show just got over 7,000 subs. Looking to push that, obviously, before the regular season starts. Let's wrap this up. As always, forever and always, go Hawks.